Ja, Goyoen, de meesten op een stream. Hello there, people on Facebook that are watching our stream. Thank you very much that you had the patience to wait. We had some technical problems, but we're all right now and we're live now. Meesten in de Sil, welkom. And for the people that are watching, because they saw the link on the Femen Facebook, this program will be mainly in English, but I'll speak in our native tongue now for just a little bit, and then we'll go back to English. Van harte welkom alle heren, van harte welkom allemaal bij een nieuw seizoen van Epen Up. We beginnen gelijk goed met een bijzondere gast waar we heel graag, maar ook heel veel werk van hebben gehad. Ik vind het super tof dat jullie gekomen zijn. Ik ben heel blij dat je hem kan binnen. Voor de meesten thuis, het grootste part van dit programma is in het Engels, want mevrouw praat geen Fries of Nederlands. Dat hier ik wel witte kind, maar we kunnen natuurlijk net live ondertitelen. Dus als je het even net witte werd het hoe giet, zeg dat dan gewoon even in de comments. Als u geen Engels begrijpt en u wilt weten waar het over ging of u begreep een woord niet, zet het gewoon in het Facebook commentaar. Dan wil vast iemand anders die ook kijkt u wel helpen. If you have questions, als u vragen heeft, als je hem vragen hebt, please ask your questions in the Facebook stream, because our newest member of the team, Bastiaan, please turn around. Hi, Bastiaan. He will watch what questions are coming in on Facebook for Inna. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce somebody, first with a little movie, so that everybody knows exactly who we are dealing with and who are we going to get to know. Yes, we all know who we are here for. Please, a big hand for Inna Shevchenko. Inna, welcome. Hi. So happy that you're here. Please take a seat. This is your mic. There's some water there. So, welcome to Leeuwarden. Have you been to the Netherlands before?
I've been to the Netherlands, but I'm very happy to be finally somewhere else, but not in Amsterdam. And I see these great smiling people. So thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here and looking forward for hopefully very exciting and even if sometimes maybe passionate debates.
Good. Well, I think that will be all right because we have way bigger mouths than people in Amsterdam have over here.
I hope so.
And we're going to prove it to you tonight. Well, we spoke earlier, we emailed, and we picked a couple of video fragments that we want to talk about during the show. There's going to be a performance by O Kutjes, which means O Cunties. That's the name of the band.
Great.
We're going to have a poet, and we're going to have somebody that's going to explain a bit about the most fiery Frisian feminist that was ever there in this province. But first of all, also for people that might have just heard of you, we would like to get to know you a little bit. And you grew up in the Ukraine during a time when the Soviet Union was falling apart. So how is that for a child to grow up in such circumstances?
Indeed, I was born the year before the collapse of USSR. The event that affected the whole generation of children like myself who were born in that time, the event that affected generation of my parents who were at that time in their 30s, their best time, many people would say. And this event cost people a decade of their life, a decade with fear, with frustration, with humiliation. I was a child. For me, that was just my childhood. But later on, I understood that I was a child in a country with a very, very big problems. I was small, once again in a country with huge problems. We were witnessing political, economic, cultural, social crisis. Well, just to give you a few simple ideas how it was to be a kid in that time, we couldn't go out in the street and play because it was unsafe, because there was criminality, people were getting attacked, killed, because everybody was just hoping to get at least something. And I'm talking about at least something, meaning something to eat, a minimum to eat. There were no we didn't have currency for 6 years. So basically the country was existing without money. We had coupons, which was just pieces of paper like what you have, where it was written what you can get with this coupon, say 2 kilos of sugar or 1 kilo of pasta or something else. So that was the reality. But once again, for me, that was just my childhood. I didn't know any other childhood, and I was a happy kid. I was loved, and I had my parents and my family. We didn't play in the streets outside, but we played at home. And today I understand that this experience, of course, shape you in a different way. They shape you from on one side, they destroy you in a way, they hit you hard, they beat you hard, but on the other side, they also form you as someone resilient, as someone ready to go through a difficult experience, and someone on one side weak, but also on the other side strong. So that's probably maybe a little roots of the fight in which I engaged in, and maybe one of the small reasons why I took the path which I took.
Good. I was doing this because I need some water. It's very hot here. Your water is over there.
You can have it.
No, it's yours. We got water enough. You don't. Let's take a big leap, because Ukraine was your motherland. You were born there. You grew up there, but you don't live there anymore. You live in political asylum in France. What happened that they didn't want you anymore, or that you couldn't be safe there anymore?
Well, it's probably unjust to say they didn't want me anymore. They didn't want anymore the cause and the ideas that I choose to defend alongside other activists, my comrades from Femen. They didn't want the movement anymore. The government in Ukraine at that time, it was still the government with the President Yanukovych, who, as a result of Maidan revolution, many of you witnessed, had run away from the country with the shame and fear. That was the time when there was a pure dictatorship in the country, and we were among the first political prisoners in the country. We were among the first to be persecuted, arrested just permanently. We were followed by secret services permanently. And at one point, after one of probably the most radical protests we did, about which I think we will talk later, that was a reason for them to finally grab us much more seriously and basically make it clear that if we stay in the country, we will stay in jail for many years.
How long was Femen already active then?
I left in 2012, and Femen was formed in 2008.
Yeah. So let's go back to 2008. What was the moment that you said, this is Femen, we have to do this, and we're going to talk about the way you do your direct action, but at what moment did you decide we need a radical feminist group?
Well, I joined the movement when it was already existing for a year. So I joined the movement in 2009. In 2008, Anna Hutzul, who is the founder of Femen Movement, together with other Ukrainian activists, they decided that they need, as young women, as young students, need their female voices finally to be heard. And the decision was, I think that I never feel ashamed, or I rather feel proud to talk about the roots of Femen, because very often when we hear about the roots of other feminist movements, they would always say, we were inspired by that theory or the other theory, or that study or another study, we were inspired by our personal lives, by our situations in which we couldn't, in which we had a lot of questions and we couldn't find any answers, in which we had so much hope, but we didn't have any perspective to make those beliefs and hopes real. So we were inspired by our desperate situation as young women who every day, daily are harassed, as young women who harassed not only just in the streets, but harassed by their professors in university if you want to pass exam, harassed sometimes by their by the owners of the apartments you rent. If you want to stay in that apartment, you are harassed by everybody just because you happen to be a woman in that country.
Is this what happens when a state is so corrupt? Does a corrupt state bring about the harassment of landlords, professors, police, employers?
This is what happens when patriarchal and traditional ideas thrive. But in which context can they strive? They can strive in the context of inequality, in the context of corruption, in the context of oligarchy in power. This is the case in Ukraine.
Oligarchy is that rich industrials are basically running things.
My country, if I should still say so, but Ukraine, as other Eastern European countries, are governed not by politicians. They are not formed as politicians. They are formed as oligarchs, as businessmen. Those people continue to govern the country.
Yeah. Let's have a look at one of your instruction videos of Femen, where in 1 minute you make clear how you actually can be a Femen activist. Let's have a look. Maybe if somebody aspires to be a Femen activist, you can learn it now at this minute.
Our God is woman.
Our mission is protest.
Our weapons are bare breasts.
Our tactic is sextremism. Every sextremist is well prepared physically and morally.
Don't be scared to face your enemies.
Be prepared to be attacked. Be reactive. Fight till the end.
To do feminine sextremist action, remember 3 main things. Rule 1. Your pose has to be aggressive. Legs are straight open, keep your hands up. We don't try to attract anyone, we try to make them scared. Rule 2. Never hide your face. Keep your posture above your head. Rule 3. Don't smile, scream.
So you can see it's very easy to be a feminine activist. It looks like it, but of course you are very radical. Let's start with the first question that's always on everybody's mouth that I got asked as well. Why the bare breasts? Why do you do this? Even some women I know say I think that's not a positive thing to be a feminist and then use your body.
Well, it will be really difficult to answer in several minutes on this question, but I think that the key phrases from this short, quick video actually can explain it. I say at one point, we do not try to attract anyone, we try to make them scared. Don't smile, scream. And these little key phrases actually explain the idea behind why we decided to act topless. We know that, the movement was born in the country. We started our activity in the country in the context where nobody wants to talk to women. Nobody wants to listen to women. They only want to look at women. Everybody is pleased to see woman's body. Woman's body is per definition, naked woman's body is by definition is sexual body, is something to please women, is something to please men, is something to attract men.
Or women, of course.
Women, well, right. But that's another context.
Oh.
And we grow up ourselves being all the time reduced to the body, that is considered to be sexual, and this body is playing a male game. It's always men who decide what this body has to do. This body is used by men for their pleasure or their enrichment. And here I'm talking about sex industry, which destroys destinies of young women in Ukraine daily, if not every minute. And
You mean that a lot of Ukrainian women are lured into porn or prostitution, or
this is basically one of the few choices you are given as a young woman for your further employment, including when you're a student in university. To survive, women have to go to work, to continue their studies. Young women want to look for a job, and the job you will be the most often proposed in Ukraine will be prostitution. So that was the context in which we were growing up ourselves as young women, but that was the context also we started to act as feminists. To make it clear, we didn't use topless tactic from the very beginning. For 2 years, Femin existed. We organized different demonstrations without even considering that one day we will use our naked bodies as political tools, as political weapons. We were demonstrating, organizing huge demonstrations in the street with huge banners. We were carrying a lot of pink color, believing that this will attract people to the statistics we were writing on the banners. But of course, we faced ignorance. And also people were laughing at us. They were laughing at us that
it was all too sweet and
let's
too
say
good.
we didn't have anything else to do, people would say. They would go find boyfriends, go spend time with your friends, go to the kitchen, very often they would say. So we were growing this anger inside us, and every time we would go in the street and start speaking out and scream, they would say, well, you're young and beautiful, you have everything, what do you want? So we would be told that our capital as women is our bodies, so we have to use them. And that was the anger that was growing inside us. And then we said, well, if they do not want to listen to us but want to look at us, we will make them look at us, but they will not be able to ignore now what we want to say. And that is why we said we're going to use these bodies that they want to see as our political posters. We're going to write our words on these bodies. They will, if they want to look at the breast, they can look at them as long as they want, but they will have to see our slogans. And that was the key moment when we decided that now this body will be political when I decided to be political, and it will be sexual when I decided to be sexual, and nobody else around me.
So either your body is sexual when you want it, or the breasts are your weapon, actually.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good. Thanks for this part. It was a great introduction. We've learned a lot. A lot of the audience can chew on. But now we go to our artists. Please get on stage. They worked really hard to get everything sorted. I'm going to hand over my mic. And before they open their MacBook, I'm just going to say that this is the most radical for you, the most radical feminist band, at least from this city. Oh, Kutjes. For the people that are on the stream that don't speak Dutch, that means oh, cunties. Please give them a hand.
It actually means oh, pussies. May we have sound, please? From the laptop. Oeh. Nou, we beginnen even opnieuw hoor.
Ik wil alles. Alles met je doen. Alles wat je in het donker wilt. Aha. Aha. Ik wil dat je in mijn oren hijgt. Ik wil dat je in mijn benen bijt. Ik wil dat je mij wilt. Helemaal wild. Ik wil dat je hele lichaam trilt. Ah, niet alleen met jou. Ik wil het met z'n allen verdrinken in lijven als in een watervallen. Aha, aha. Het is toch lekker, lekker, lekker. Het is toch lekker, lekker, lekker. Allemaal. Allemaal. Het is toch lekker, lekker, lekker. Het is toch lekker, lekker, lekker. Allemaal. Allemaal. Met je ogen open of met je ogen dicht. Als je tegen de muur staat of op je rug ligt. Met z'n tweeën of z'n drieën, met z'n 4 of 5 of meer. In ons allerblootste blootje, in een outfitje van leer. Het is gezellig en gezond om lekker wild te vrijen. Gezelliger dan hardlopen en beter nog dan breien. Het is gezellig en gezond, ja, om lekker wild te vrijen. Please, laten we niks zeggen en gewoon lekker gaan vrijen. Het is toch lekker, lekker, lekker. Het is toch lekker, lekker, lekker. Oh, zo lekker. Allemaal. Het is toch lekker, lekker, lekker. Het is toch lekker, lekker, lekker. Allemaal. Allemaal. Dankjewel.
Lekker. So, Ina, let's see if there's some questions from the audience. Maybe of the stuff that we heard before. Anybody who has a question for Ina, you can do it now. Marianne is there. Yeah, there we go.
What's your name and what's your question?
I'm Kees Westra, and my question is, do you have any international contacts? Because I think, you feel better if you feel a reunion with all the people who think the same as you do, as women, but also men have problems, I think.
Since I had to run away and flee Ukraine in 2012, I came to Paris, to France, where there were already a group of support of women who wanted to start Femin in France, and that's what we did. That's how we began the journey that is called right now Femin International, and today Femin exists in 8 countries. So we are today in international movement, and I must say that we never did anything on purpose to make a move Femin International from Ukraine. What happened is that women from different countries started to say, we recognize ourselves in this fight, in this form of protest. We need this in our context to react on the issues that bother us in our countries. Because indeed, if we can say that the contexts are very different between, of course, Ukraine and France or Spain or the Netherlands and Ukraine, for example, but we can always find commonalities, and especially this idea that still governs the minds of people everywhere in the world, that women woman's body is sexual by definition, that woman has to be beautiful and sexy to succeed in this world, and so on and so forth. So, of course, we saw the reaction of women in other countries when they recognized themselves that the rebellious body, not passive body, that body that screams and doesn't smile and does not keep silent, is something that they needed. And of course, I feel very proud about that. And today, Femin is absolutely international movement. Moreover, we have male members in our movement. They do not protest topless and so on and so forth, because of course we keep the idea of women's body becoming a political tool, freeing itself from being sexualized by various institutions, and becoming a political and serving women's interests. But men help us, they are our allies, and very often they help us to prepare those protests.
Are there any chapters in the Netherlands?
We started a work in the Netherlands with a group of women in Amsterdam. And then there were sort of tensions and complicated debates, in particular about, of course, the issue of prostitution, on which here is a very different view. And so for now, I think we need to reunite
let's do a check. Is there anybody here who says, yes, any women or men say, I want to join Femin? There's one there, one maybe. Oh, you have a question? Yeah, Marianne, please. So we have one maybe member over there. Anybody else who wants to join Femin? Yeah.
We're gonna make it.
She says she doesn't want to go topless. There's a question over here at the front.
Wat is je naam en wat is je vraag?
In English, please.
Hi, I'm Hasna. Well, I would very much like to join Femin, but if I were to join Femin, would I be obligated to go topless?
Absolutely not. We have various forms of membership, and it's always you decide what you want to do in the movement and how you want to participate and contribute to the movement, whether you want to go directly to the battlefield, as we would call it, and protest, you know, in the right time, whenever the time comes, or maybe it will never come, or maybe it comes right away. You are the one who decides to do that. You will have to be formed, you will have to be prepared. As you can see, we do train our activists because indeed our protests are very physical, and very often not only physical pressure and physical difficulty, but also psychological pressure that one might feel when you have to storm a barricade, you know, a line of policemen, or when a policeman runs towards you and arrests you and throws you in a car, or even can be violent. Of course, it requires some physical skills to resist or to stay in the place, but also psychological skills and psychological preparation, I would say. So you would have to be formed whenever you want to test yourself, whether you want to go to the protest or not. Otherwise, you can give us a hand with communication, with monitoring our targets, with planning, with we today also spend a lot of time on public meetings. We published in the last 2 years, we published 3 books written by our activists. So today we try to develop our activity on various levels, but still, of course, manifesting, protesting remains our main activity.
There's loads to do. We do questions a little bit later because I want to go to freedom of speech, because you are freedom of speech is for you very important. Does freedom of speech for you have any boundaries?
I think that it is very difficult, or probably even impossible, to imagine any other freedoms without freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is absolutely fundamental freedom to all other freedoms and rights.
So are you allowed to say anything you want?
I do think that everybody has its inherent right to express his or her opinion out loud. This opinion might be judged. This opinion might be attacked. This opinion might be criticized or maybe laughed at by others. But your right to express yourself is there.
Okay, let's take something from what has been in the news last week. You have heard of Geert Wilders, of course. Everybody has. He's one of our more interesting exports. And what he called for a couple of weeks ago was a Mohammed cartoon contest in Parliament. You might have heard about it. And there were big protests in Pakistan, even a terror attack now in Amsterdam on 2 American tourists, in which it's becoming more clear that the person was attracted to go to the Netherlands because he thought Islam was insulted. And he said, okay, I'm not going to do the contest anymore. Do you think he should have gone through and he should have held the Mohammed cartoon contest?
Well, the second part of your question suggests that I have to give advices to Geert Wilders.
No,
and I'm not
just
going to do that.
No. Not like should have.
no,
But I'm wondering if you
understand.
think a Mohammed cartoon contest would be a thing you would have to be able to do because of freedom of expression.
Look, I think that drawing a cartoon on any religious character, even such an important for Islamic community, for Muslim people as Muhammad, shouldn't be a crime, shouldn't be something that we're not allowed to do, and especially something that would put our lives at risk. And I'm talking as someone who knows what risk it can imply. I knew personally, and they were one of the closest friends I encountered in Paris, were cartoonists of Charlie Hebdo. And they were shot, they were killed. They were shot in their heads by Kalashnikov, by terrorists with Kalashnikovs for their cartoons. Something as innocent as a drawing can lead someone to take Kalashnikov and take you as a target.
So maybe you shouldn't do it.
I do not have anything. Well, I think that portraying, mocking, laughing at everything is our right. Criticizing everything, including religious leaders, is our right. Religious characters, religions by itself. Because we criticize ideas, we criticize characters, we laugh at characters and ideas. And I think this is the most fundamental thing for progress of any society.
So
if we do not have... Let me develop my thought, because about Geert Wilders, it's very touchy thing. And I think that you cannot just simply look at this question just like that. Geert Wilders actually is a very dangerous person. And the fact that he organized such a contest using the pretext of freedom of speech is actually a very dangerous thing. He used he hijacked the speech of, the right to express yourself. But why does he organize a contest on cartoons of Muhammad only? Why not other religious characters? Why not all religions, for example, which are taboo still today? We as feminine activists who criticize all monotheist religions and institutions are permanently attacked by all religious communities and religious extremists. Why did he choose to draw only Muhammad? Why? So, of course, here is obviously a hidden provocation by Geert Wilders, who, of course, wanted to aim to insult and attack specific Muslim community. He knew that people will be hurt, and he knew which specific people will be hurt. And that those specific people he wanted to hurt. He didn't want to discuss an issue with all the society. He wanted to hurt a minority, a religious minority in this country. And this is the tactic of all populists. They always choose this rhetoric of us versus them. He talks to you, Dutch people, and them in this country, in this context, are Muslims for him. And he tries to create these clashes. And this contest that he organized saying we are for freedom of speech, he did not organize for freedom of speech. He organized to hurt Muslim community, and he did it.
I think you, You were right. You developed that thought very well. Since you started about famine and religion, I've seen a movie of you or your activist cutting down a Christian cross. We saw the almost slapstick baby Jesus stealing from a nativity scene in the Vatican. You've went on stage topless at a conservative Muslim conference in France. You don't have any friends, not a lot of friends anymore in Tunisia, where Femin has been active, or at the Tunisian embassy. So, what is Femin's issue with religions? Can you explain?
Another very big question. If you're gonna try to stop me after 30 seconds.
No. I'm getting a little bit afraid now. So.
Look, I probably would take responsibility and try to paraphrase your question. Here, the question should be asked, what is the problem, what is the issue of religions, monotist religions, organized religions with women, like us? And this is the reason why we, as activists, feminist activists, go and stage those protests, chop down the crosses, steal the Jesus baby, which was plastic, of course. This is probably the right question to ask. We are always the ones accused for provoking, for attacking, but what about centuries that women have been attacked? What about daily today that we hear the speeches from the central point of Vatican, where even so-called progressist Pope still campaigns. He spends 70% of his time campaigning to prohibit abortions for women. What about various clerics in different institutions pointing out on modesty dress code for women, again telling us with who we have to sleep, how and who we have to love, how we have to dress, how we have to study, whether we have to study or not, what books we should read. This interest or obsession, fetish of organized religions continues, a fetish with women, with controlling women, and moreover, fetish with women's bodies. They just think about it. Each part of woman's body has a set of dogmas and rules proposed, written in each holy book. About our hair, they don't want them to be in the wind. They don't want to see them because this is too dangerous for men to see, and they might not control themselves when they see that. About our smiles, our speeches, we should be silent, we should not laugh, we should not sing. Women's voice is a taboo in many Orthodox groups, religious groups. Our breasts are obviously our bodies, our bellies are controlled, our sex, our vaginas, they want to own it, they want to control, they want to impose rules on it. They want to control where women's feet step in. They want to control each part of a woman's body, and that's the issue of them with us. What we do, we only reveal this issue. We show it in front of the eyes of the society. We show how religious institutions, with their outdated dogmas that have never been changed, with their outdated medieval dogmas and rules, how they continue to penetrate lives of women. In some countries more visibly and more clear and more straightforward. In some countries through political lobbies, undercover, under the carpet, where you do not really know whether religious lobbies are involved or not. So this is the issue. This is their issue with us. I do not have any problem with religion as long as this religion has no problem with me. But unfortunately, they do have problem with me as long as I'm remaining in this female body, as long as I'm proud to be woman, and as long as I'm a woman who speaks out. They always have problems with us.
Thanks. There's a question from Facebook, so we go to Bastiaan.
Yes, Bastiaan.
So Simon Saab is asking, does Femen have a stance on legalized prostitution?
Yeah, I think this is because you said there were issues between Femen and the feminists in Amsterdam about prostitution. What is Femen's stance on prostitution?
This is one of the fundamental issues of Femen movement. This is actually the issue and the question that provoked Femen's birth in Ukraine. We are against prostitution. We fight sex industry, which exploits women, which considers women to be a good that can be sold, used, even temporarily. We are against the industry which involves violence, humiliation of women, which of course contains, and it's part of sex industry, the human trafficking, against which everybody, I think, even those who defend sex industry, they would say, of course, we're against human trafficking, but human trafficking is part of it. And we have, for a decade, we have fought against this issue. We have brought it up in Ukraine, And this issue is one of our victories, that this issue has never been discussed in public debates and political debates in Ukraine and in Eastern Europe. And that was our victory. We brought it up. We showed how through particularly the event, that's international event that took place in Ukraine in 2012, the World Cup, Football World Cup, when of course, while the government was rebuilding and fixing the infrastructure for these big international events, one of the things that was the most visible, the changes that were the most visible in the cities where the matches took place, is that we've got so many brothels. We've got more brothels than pharmacies and schools and children gardens at that time. So we strongly stand against prostitution. We strongly consider prostitution to be one of the biggest diseases of society, which continues to, it's these bloody machines that continues to eat, to gobble destinies of young women. Obviously, we do know that majority of the prostitutes who are involved in this industry, who do work as prostitutes, are women vulnerable economically. Are women here, if it's women in Western countries, it's usually women from Eastern Europe, African countries, Asian women. It's very rarely local women. So we know that in the situation of vulnerability, women get involved into this industry, and in a very difficult circumstances, they can get out of it. And I'm not a fan and a keen of this romantic discussion that here in Western Europe are often taking place about prostitution being a sort of a profession of, for freedom of women and freedom of sexuality. This romanticized language, of course, it's very romantic to see it this way, but the reality in sex industry is very difficult, and such a romantic language cannot be applied to what majority of those women live daily. So our stands are very clear, and we did not change and will not change our position. Prostitution is evil that destroys destinies of vulnerable women.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think Simon's question got answered as well. Please, people, keep on asking questions. We were talking also about freedom of speech, and I want to go to an incident that everybody knows about, but I want to go to it. We've edited the little movie for it because it has brought you in grave danger as well, standing up for freedom of speech. First, we're going to hear some audio from a meeting just like this in Copenhagen a couple of years ago.
And the turning point is but. Why do we still say but when we...
Tonight in Copenhagen, windows of the cafe now riddled with about 30 bullet holes as a gunman opened fire on the cafe this afternoon during a free speech event. One man attending the event was killed. 3 police officers were injured. Police released this fuzzy photo of the suspect.
So, this must have been very, very scary. Very, very confronting. The question that comes to my mind is, are you willing to die for your cause?
I think that this would be probably the biggest mistake if someone thinks that this event was something someone could be willing to experience. And I'm not willing anybody to experience something like this, including my enemies, including those people who take those guns and go to kill people because they do not agree with something that is said. I do not want them to experience that. We survived. Well, not all of us. Thanks to protection of police, majority of the audience survived. There were 2 people who were killed and 3 or 4 policemen were injured. I'm sorry, I cannot recall the details. But thanks to the police protection, we survived, majority of us. But, I think it's something that, of course, affects you for life. Experiencing this moment when you think that this might be the last moment is something that, probably it would be ridiculous if I will try to describe it, but it's something that will, surely it affects everybody for life, and it's something with which you have to live every day now. But you know, the key point for me of that event and this horrific experience was that as long as I am in the context, in the situation, in the places where for someone it's easier to take a gun and go and kill people than to accept an opinion with which you do not agree, I cannot remain quiet. I cannot just shut up and, give up my ideas and give the win to those people like this guy who took the gun. He went, after our event, he went to synagogue and killed there also, I believe, 2 people and attacked people there. This person wanted to kill those with whom he does not agree. And here we come back to this question, should we not say things that might provoke someone? Now let's think why this guy could be provoked. Why would he take a gun? What would lead him to take a gun? Maybe our silence? Maybe the previous silence we had about the issues? What we were discussing at that event is art and blasphemy. Critique of religion, critique of something that is considered to be taboo, of something that is considered to be sensitive issue. Why something is considered sensitive issue? It's considered sensitive when we do not know it well, when we do not know how to touch it, what it looks like if we really go inside it. But so let's go inside it. Let's talk about the issues. Let's make clear that, yes, my entire religious speech can hurt someone's feelings, but there is no such a right not to get hurt, right? There is a right for free speech and for free expression. So we have to normalize the idea that someone might disagree with you, someone might criticize your ideas and your arguments. I'm all the time criticized. I'm all the time attacked as a feminist, as woman, as some would say radical activist. But because I'm criticized, because my opinion is attacked, either I give up some of my arguments that are wrong, that are weak, or I reinforce them by finding new arguments. So actually, I do need the critique. I do need the attacks. So I think that it's time right now to really teach each other and accept it in our heads that to get hurt because someone disagrees with you is normal. And if if our opinions are not challenged, if our ideas, like, for example, European values, for so long they have not been challenged. It became a dogma, a silent dogma. Everybody took it as given. Now they are challenged, and now we are struggling, we are fighting a very difficult fight when these values might lose and be, destroyed, because for so long they were taking as something that we do not need to defend anymore, because nobody challenged them. So I think challenging ideas is actually a way to continue to improve these ideas, to continue to improve our values, to find better arguments, or to give up something that we do not need, something where we are actually mistaken. So that's probably the main point about freedom of speech.
Yeah, thanks. We are very happy that you're here, that you're able to tell this. People know also from what was in the papers that we were also challenged in how we had to do security and who we had to talk to the police and the mayor, and this going to cost us money. And but we did say that we wanted to do it with a big window here, right. Same as in Copenhagen. Everybody can see us. And I think that and I have to going to make you a compliment, I think we can do this, evenings like this every week, because there's people like you struggling on the forefront of freedom of speech. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for making this happen. Thank you.
We now go to poetry. We asked Helena Hoogkamp to do some poetry for us, and she's going to do it. It's in Dutch, but if you feel it, then you probably will understand it.
I will try not to smile. Zolang je al hun namen nog kent, ben je geen slet. Toen hij het vroeg, knipperde ik nadenkend en zei aarzelend de 10e.
Binnen het kader van een opwaarts compliment kun je vrij veel maken qua details. Alleen komt hij er soms zomaar op terug bij het boodschappen doen. Sta ik bij de groentela een komkommer uit te zoeken, dan betrekt zijn gezicht en vraagt hij: maar vond je dat dan niet vies? Van heel dichtbij lijkt iedereen op elkaar. Hoe verder je inzoomt op een stuk huid, hoe meer het bekend voorkomt. Er zijn haartjes en geschonden plekjes. Zelfs een litteken kan universeel zijn, omdat het is geheeld. Als je vanaf een heel hoog punt kijkt, bijvoorbeeld een galerij van een flat, lijken de mensen beneden dezelfde kant op te gaan. Het moet gek zijn om te weten dat je geliefde een paar verdiepingen onder je rondloopt en je hem alleen uit alle voorbijgangers kan pikken aan de hand van zijn trui. Alle mensen zijn dus gelijk als je van ver genoeg kijkt of als je bij ze op schoot gaat zitten. Helaas zit daartussen zoveel ruimte. Toen ik een ijsje had, omdat ik net was ontmaagd, begreep ik sommige liefdesliedjes beter. Toch waren er ook nog songs zoals Purple Rain en Jolene, waarvan de gevoelens mij groot en onwerkelijk leken. Ergens daarboven staat een universele jukebox die plaatjes draait, zodat je elke vorm van wanhoop, verlies en extase zelf kunt leren kennen. En de tekst van I Want to Break Free ook op jou van toepassing kan zijn. Salo. Een hand op mijn been als een blauwe zeester. Ik adem niet meer sinds hij op play heeft gedrukt. Het is een zwarte bank waarop ik seks heb, waarop ik slaap en eet. Het is een bank van de IKEA, het remblokje op de wieltjes is stuk. Op de televisie, die mijn moeder niet meer wilde, knipt iemand met een tang in een tong. Het is ontbijtkoek, waar de gezichten van de kindacteurs mee worden ingesmeerd. Kinderen van 12 kunnen veel. Ik schaam me voor de eigenaar van de hand. Voor mijn ademhaling tijdens de spannende stukjes. Voor mijn aanwezigheid tijdens de verkrachtingsscènes. Ik schaam me voor mijn bank die tegen de muur beukt op het ritme van huilende kindacteurs. Als hij naar huis is gegaan, zonder iets te zeggen, wil ik een sigaret, maar ik rook helemaal niet. En ik wil mijn mond alleen nog maar gebruiken als het leven vanaf nu zo 2 dingen tegelijkertijd blijft. Pijp in de douche en een nootje van de pindakaas achter je kiezen voelen plakken. Zijn cd's stelen, maar lief zijn voor zijn planten. Verontwaardiging, alsof wij ergens recht op hebben. En de troost die we vreemden schenken, omdat ze hun gezicht vertrekken. Dank jullie wel.
Dankjewel. En we horen straks nog meer van je. We will hear more from you later. You might have heard that Leeuwarden is European Capital of Culture this year. So in our program, we always look at what's going to happen in the next couple of days. So we have a little movie about a expo that's coming up. You can go and see it in the Stadsoase. Matthea, it opens this weekend?
No, Wednesday.
Wednesday. It opens next Wednesday. Yeah. At 4:30 next Wednesday, and then you can go there every day. And we have a little trailer. Right, everybody should go there from next week, Wednesday. Right, Inna, we have a video that you selected of some action you did in Paris. And whilst we show the video, also for the soundman, geluidsman, We're gonna talk over the video, so you just know. Can you please tell us what we're seeing, where it is, who you're protesting against, and I've already seen it, who the very angry men are that are shouting
It's always
at you.
angry men.
Yeah, there we go.
Right. So I wanted to show this protest because it's in 2013 that we already started feeling the wave of the far-right groups in France, in particular, rising up. At that time, the issue of, having this right-wing leaders with their rhetoric was not really visible. It was not really felt. Nobody felt still that Marine Le Pen could be a real threat. Everybody would still laugh that Front National would ever be about to get power in this country.
So
but
who are these men?
So all of these are the far-right nationalist groups, activists of various nationalist groups. There are various fractions in France who are, of course, connected with Front National and Marine Le Pen, but those are the radical ones. Those are the ones who go and target physically migrants. Those are, you can see they're like the skinheads, and they use Nazi symbols, Nazi rhetoric, Nazi looks, music, all the symbols and emblems and so on and so forth. So since Femen really strongly stands on non-violent tactics, protest tactics, we decided just to rise above them while they are having their march with their symbols and their xenophobic far-right nationalist slogans, and we throw down this huge banner with women's images with their fists up that said "Sextermination for Nazism." As you heard in the previous videos, we call our tactic sextremism. And of course, we always try to play with the rhetoric and symbols of those who we attack. And those groups actually use such a violent language as extermination of people and so on and so forth. They do not feel ashamed to use such language. So we proposed a sextermination for their ideas, for the values that they propagate. And that was 2013. And why I wanted to show that protest is to remind that sometimes we think that the enemy that is in front of us is not really our enemy. And we should not waste time and really engage into debates and really question their ideas or argue or try to convince someone that they are wrong and that they, and take the things that you have here in Western Europe for granted. And this is why in 2013 nobody could still think that many European governments today will be led by far-right xenophobes, and in other countries those xenophobes are about to take power. And just a small reminder that don't take things for granted. If you think that you got everything today, be sure there is someone today who works really hard, so that you do not have it tomorrow. And if like these far-right groups come up today and you think, well, they say right things about, I don't know, migrants, the issue that polarizes everybody, or about the power bureaucrats in European Union, which irritate everybody. If you think that, well, they do not really, we will never have the horrible history that we had in Europe before, this will never happen again because we are not there anymore. Well, they want us to go there, because if you listen to them, they do not have new ideas. The only thing they propose is old ideas. They want old world. They want to bring us back. And they do hijack the language of, the rise. They say we are freedom. They call themselves Freedom Party, of course. They say we are for freedom of speech. But look look much deeper what is behind those right slogans, right? You listen, well, he defended freedom of speech, Geert Wilders. But no, he wanted to attack a minority. He wanted to show that he can be a victim. He want to polarize the society more. And just, it's a small reminder, don't think things for granted. Don't think that if today everything is right, tomorrow it will be right too. Don't think that. Never stay quiet, never be relaxed. Fight for your rights, fight for those values and those achievements that you have today. Because once again, tomorrow you might lose them. And moreover, I think that maybe you will not agree with that, but I will put this responsibility on you. I think that such advanced countries like yours, democratically advanced, you have a responsibility in front of countries like, for example, the one where I was born. People there, they look at you. They want to live like you. And if you give up your achievements and your advancement, then those people have even less perspective and possibilities to move forward with their path, on their path of democracy and on their path of getting more rights and freedoms and possibilities. So guard what you have.
Good. It's time for some more music. So I'm going to hand over the mic when they've logged into the MacBook again. And if you have a question for Inna, think of it, because after music we're going to do questions. And put your finger up, then we'll be able to find you. Yes. Once more applause for Okutjes.
Kom op, geluidsman.
Ik heb armen,
Armen van Ghoststeaks.
want als ik het niet doe,
Dan ziet ze niks.
ik wil me warmen.
Warmer aan je lijf. Maar dat gaat niet, want ik ben een lelijk wijf.
Niemand ziet me,
Niemand kan me vinden,
geen mannenhart.
wil mij verslinden. Ik wil meedoen, dat ik erbij mag. En dat het niet voelt, alsof iedereen me uitlacht.
Eyes are up here, bitches. Dankjewel.
Okutjes, geweldig. Ja, daar wil je 's ochtends mee wakker worden. Voor we naar de vraag gaan, before we go to the question, what we always like to do in Epen Up is talk about the historical context of the subject that we're talking about. Feminism is, of course, a subject that we talked about, women's rights. And we used to have a very radical feminist in our midst here, just after the Second World War, who was one of the main leaders of the second wave of feminism. And but I've only found that out recently. But we have her biographer here. He's writing a book about her. Her name is Toni Feitsma. We see her here. She doesn't live anymore. She's way more than a feminist, but feminism was one of her things. And right now we're going to listen to a power college from Liewe Westra, her biographer. He's going to do it in Frisian about who Toni Feitsma was. Applaus.
Ja, Toni Feitsma, ben in 1928 in Brandgem bij Dokkum, een huishouding van bouwboeren. Maar beslist net traditioneel, want ze waren maar een paar jaar oud. De hele familie die ging naar de Wieringermeer. Die wie door Krekdroeglijn, een van de allereerste boeren der pioniers. En net alleen nog op dat meid, maar zij leren de jonge Toni, die maar zal iets van, leren ze thuis al lezen en schreeuwen in het Friesk. En dat in Holland. En als lietsvamke schreeuwden zij al briefjes naar de Ljouwerte kranten dat een bennenrubriek weer. En net al in de Friesk, Hollands, zij weer een talenwoender, ze woe leren, ze waren gestimuleerd, ze gingen naar de universiteit in de jaren 50. Dat wie alle jaren nou wel redelijk normaal in die tijd voor een vamke, voor een vrouw. Maar ze woe net alleen nog lerares of ze woe verder, ze woe de wetenschap in. En ze kreeg een beurs, ze mocht onderzoek doen, maar doen ze dus in dat glazen plafond onmerk ze dat ze als vrouw in een maliesvrouw eigenlijk totaal net accepteerde waren. Ze hadden krekselang gewoon vochten dat ze een van de eerste hoogleraren, professors Friesk waren en dat waren ze in Amsterdam. Wie is zij een emancipeerder? Ja, en dan vooral op het merk van het Friesk. En zij haar stelling weer van het oeral, de squallen en de televisie en de kranten en de politie en de burgemeester. Als die al jaar Hollands praten, dan krijgen Nederlandstaligen het gevoel dat ze krijgen een libitie beter binnen als de Friestaligen. En het allerslimste is, de Friestaligen die krijgen datzelfde gevoel, dat zij krijgen een libitie minder binnen. En daar vocht het in. Ze dienen dat net op een barricaden. Nee, ze bellen on of ze bellen op en ze praten. Krijg ze lang ont het peteer op gang kwam en krijg ze lang ont haar punt duidelijk weer. Nou had je binnen die dingen alle jaar, nou net niet eens alle jaar, maar in een boek. Je hebt het, een kloek boek, zeiden ze dan. Al die dingen die ben goed formuleerd en die stenen ik als een hoes. Maar ze wie net alleen de wetenschapper, ze wie ik de vrouw die 40 jaar lang aan de universiteit tal van Friesen onderwijs heeft en dat wie net alleen de theorie, dat wie ik de praktijk. En nou had je binnen 2 belangrijke boeken verschijnd en het ene dat is dit, maar het oren. Zulke boeken binnen net volle, dat is een boek in de vorm van een brief. En in dat boek hebben we tal van haar leerlingen en oud-leerlingen schreeuwen wat zij voor haar betutten. En dan jaar je mensen onder het woord Mali en ik vrouwlie. Die wat eerst in die Mali vrouw komen. Maar ik gewoon dit uit een milieu komen dat het helemaal net gewoon is om te studeren. Of mensen die seksueel oren geaardheid hebben als de meerderheid. Mensen met oren kleur, mensen met oren vakker. En mijn conclusie is, als ik dit boek lees, alle keren weer, Toni Feitsma, die het van 1960 en 2000, dan misschien wel de helft van Friesland emancipeert. Dank u wel.
Thank you. Thank you all. Right, I think it's a good time in and out to take questions from the audience. First one, there's lots of questions. Please raise your hands. Just pick one, Marianne.
Ja, we gaan hierheen. Wat is je naam en wat is je vraag?
Hello, I'm Sjoerd. I have 2 questions, if I may. First one, if we're talking about feminism, how would your ideal world look like? And, or maybe more important, how do you think we could create a world like that? And second of all, if we talk about your identity, your country is a part of your identity, so they say. Do you feel like Ukraine is still a part of your identity? Do you want Ukraine to be a part of your identity because of all the stuff that happened? Yeah, I'll just wrap up. I'll let you answer.
Yeah. So first of all, what would an ideal world be from your point of view? And do you still feel Ukrainian? Let's do the first one first. Ideal world.
Yeah, well, very difficult question. Ideal world.
About feminism, because otherwise it's
Right.
Yeah. The ideal.
Right. Yeah. Well, ideal world for feminists. Yeah. Feminism is, that there is this very famous, known by everybody, quote that feminism is a radical idea that woman is a human being, and that's basically, that what we fight today still for is that woman is considered as equal human being to men, and we're still there. Which so this is our daily life, a daily fight about, which does not mean that we cannot dream and dream big and imagine a world, something unrealistic, some utopia, because every big idea, every big achievement one day was utopia. So for me, I think that what we are building today, every feminist has a very different, probably, ideal world and different utopia. But what we are building today is a world where everybody would feel comfortable being who they are, and everybody would dare to manifest themselves the way they are, the way they feel. And this is something very simple, but this is not where we are. And here I'm talking about women, I'm talking about sexual minorities, I'm talking about different groups of people, where we do not have to build walls between us to feel more comfortable in a small community of people like us, but where we destroy the walls, or at least open more doors make doors in those walls. So I think that what I would like to see is a heterogeneous world everywhere, where our identities are those that we define for ourselves, where our abilities are those that we feel we have and not we are told we have, where our the chances we have are equal regardless of what we have between our legs, or regardless of the body we have, or sexuality we have, or how we feel. So probably I'm talking about something very simple that could be described as equality, but it's actually not that simple. So that's the utopia I'm fighting for. About my identity, whether I feel Ukrainian and whether I want this identity, I am proudly everywhere will always repeat that I'm Ukrainian born, and I grew up in Ukraine in that specific context that shaped me the way I am, with fragility but also with resilience. And I think, to be honest, since my utopia and my ideal world is the world of absolute equality, probably that is the world where nationalities do not exist. Because I think that as long as the sign on the passport gives you more rights or less rights, just because by chance you happen to be born in one place or in another, or just because by chance you happen to have that passport and not another passport, you deserve less respect or less rights. I think that this does not fit anyhow in the ideal world of equality. So I think that Ukraine has a big influence on me, and it's part of my identity. Today, France is also part of my identity. Europe is part of my identity. But, I feel in exile. I live in exile, but the only place where I feel home, and the only situation where I feel home, is actually everywhere where I can express my ideas and fight for those ideas. So whether I'm in Netherlands, I feel home as long as I can speak out and talk and discuss with you the issues that bother me, that are important for me. Whether I'm in France and I can continue my fight, I feel home. As long as those ideas and this fight and this passion for which I live today is with me, I feel home, and this is my identity. And I'm proud Ukrainian, proud French, proud Dutch today too.
Here we would say, welcome thuis.
Thank you.
Next question.
Yes, ik heb hier nog een vraag. Wat is je
And
naam?
only one question, please, so other people get the chance as well.
My name is Matthea de Jong. You were mentioning European values and that some are important and you need to fight for them. But there are also other values that you might want to leave behind. Can you expand on that? You already answered the question about the nationalities, but are there other European values that you think, wow, it's time to get rid of?
I think that, of course, well, I am a big fan of Europe and European project and European values. And I'm here talking about fundamental European values, the foundational values. And I will always be one of the vigorous critics of bureaucrats and the institutions that today represent Europe and that do not fit to these foundational values of Europe. But I do believe that this idea of open territory, open space where people can strive for their successes, look for possibilities, move, enjoy the exchanges, enjoy exchange of culture, of languages, of knowledge, communication. I think it's one of the most beautiful places actually to live, Europe still. And I do want people to appreciate it, because as an outsider, I think I can talk about it. I know how it is somewhere else. And I really want you to appreciate it. But of course, the closeness of Europe as a kind of elitist area for some sort of elite, and this idea of guarding the borders and guarding the, whether building walls or by legislations that are discriminative and consider, people should be thrown out if they are not from here, is something that I think European values in general will suffer from, and Europe will suffer from, and Europeans will suffer in the long term. So I think that this elitist behavior is something to give up, and to continue to march on the ideas of equality, prosperity for every people, for people who want to try.
Thanks. More questions,
yes,
probably. Yes,
over
here.
What's your name and what's your question?
My name is Ellen. So this is a really, really difficult subject. It's just massive. You mentioned before that abuse against women, feminism, has a different meaning in different countries, right? How do you measure progress?
I think that, if I understand right, I think that that's true that very often Western ideas of feminism and women's rights are often imposed on other societies, other cultures, in a rather violent and wrong way. And freedom in one place for some people might mean something else for other people, right? And of course, women's rights question is something where you can see that very clearly. I will say that I want the world where there are same human rights women can count on in America and in Africa. I want to see the world where women can count on same rights and same opportunities in Europe and in Russia, for example. I don't think that Americans deserve different rights from Middle Eastern women, for example. I don't think that there are different freedoms women should count on depending on where they happen to be born. But at the same time, I do understand and feel it's important to see the progress. For example, we were recently very cheered by the news from Saudi Arabia that women can drive. And everybody said, wow, they are so far, still women can only now drive. And everybody was bashing this change and saying, well, why would we cheer up for such a thing? But we do have to cheer up, because that is the freedom for which women strived for so long there and risked their lives and still continue to risk, as 11 activists who campaigned for decades are right now in jail.
Or executed.
Right. So I think that the measurement, where it should be different depending on the context. But at the same time, we should not trap ourselves in this idea that women in Saudi Arabia deserve this freedom, while in America, another sort of freedom. We all have to strive for the world where we all can count on freedom we deserve, on basic rights. But depending on the context, of course, measuring, I think it's a great win. It's a huge win for Saudi Arabian society and for women that today they can drive. It's revolution. Well, it's a small step for us, but for them it's a revolution. Yeah. So measuring by our standards their situation is wrong. Good. But we have to strive for the society in Saudi Arabia where they can not only drive, but also work, also travel without permission of male guard. Right. Yeah. So.
Okay, there's only time for 2 more questions because he get kicked off the stream. So I have one there. Please make it a short question and maybe
okay, I'll make it short.
Short answer, yeah.
I have a question about
What is your name?
Joyce. And I have a question about your safety because, you speak out now and like everyone knows you now and so you can be more protected or not, that's one. But in the beginning, like before you started Femen and you did speak out, how you were protected? Were you protected? Or because I can imagine that people are constantly, when you speak out, it happens constantly. When you speak out, people are trying to...
the question, so I gonna...
Thanks.
Yeah, the question is, you're very protected now. Were you always so protected?
I was never protected and I'm not very protected now, thanks to organization here. Today we're all protected, but it's great to women, which is, I'm very thankful. So, I was never protected in my daily life and I'm not protected in my daily life. At the events, public events, for sake of all security of everybody, these events are protected whenever I speak and wherever I speak. But I think that taking risk is something that, well, it requires, trying to make change requires taking risk. Nobody made really changes without taking risk, whether taking risk to be not accepted by others or taking physical risk for your life. So just, I think that everybody in one point or another in our life, we have all to be brave and we all have to take risk in one way or another. I'm taking it maybe on another scale, but
you're very good at it.
That's, that's what making, or believe, at least trying to make changes, this requires taking risks. So never hesitate taking risks because being careful never saved anybody's real life. Being silent, being quiet never saved your life, anybody's life. So.
Last question.
My name is Anna. About 10 years ago, you said you and Femen chose the strategy of using your body as a political tool. And I'm wondering, when you look back on these 10 years, do you feel satisfied about what it has brought about? And do you think it has changed a lot?
I think that I feel very proud and I will always feel proud for this whole journey, for what we went through, for every woman that I saw during these 9 years, for me, the changes that happen in each woman, including myself. So I think the biggest result, even though we have results that we can be proud of specific situation where we made a change, or of in general changing public opinion, like in Ukraine or everywhere else about women's body, just showing the picture of a rebellious body changed a lot, the perception of what the body can be. In France, for example, we hear today that it's already in jargon, daily jargon of children who at school, whenever there is a girl who kind of says to a boy, don't tease me or don't touch me, there is this expression right now between the school kids. They say in French, fait à feminine, like she does her feminine, like she's being feminine. So it's already in daily, it's in mentality. It's part of mentality in some countries where famine had bigger impact. So I'm very proud for this whole journey. But I will never hide and pretend that we didn't do mistakes. And of course we did serious mistakes, but and things that I would look right now back and I would say, well, this I would do differently. But at the same time, I know that we did mistakes because this fight was so, and this movement is so authentic. We never had anybody telling us how it should be done. We never had an instruction. We made it all always in a serious insecurity, without any resources. The only resource was our courage, our will to change something, our will to say something. That is the only resource that famine has, is a human resource. And I'm very proud of it. And, I think that about mistakes, I think that today, after all these 10 years, I can say that I do not feel afraid to make mistakes, and you should not feel afraid to make mistakes. We should feel afraid to stay the same. And I'm sure, and I'm proud of it, that movement did not stay the same. We changed, we evolved throughout these 10 years, and today famine is very different than as it was at the beginning.
Will you ever stop in the future?
Well, this is, it's a question. My mother always asks me, when will you stop? It's like she always wants me to stop. Stop what? Stop fighting for myself, defending my cause?
Go do something else, gardening or just relaxing,
I
traveling.
enjoy gardening, by the way. I think that this is part of me. This is what I am. This is who I am. These women, incredible women that I met during these 9 years, they are the wonder women, that marked me forever. And we changed ourselves. We changed each other. It's something that will always be you. You cannot stop it. And for me, it's unimaginable to stop defending your own cause, to stop defending yourself, to stop striking for more rights, freedom, and possibilities for yourself. We all struggle. We all try to defend ourselves. We all want to live better. We all want to have tomorrow better, right? I do it in this way, you do it in another way in your daily life. We all want it. So I will never stop. As long as I live, I will never stop. I might say that maybe I will not be in some years, I will not go in the street and protest, because today, being here in Western Europe, of course, it's a fight already of women who are from here. My fight was, the main fight was in Ukraine, in the context in which I grew up, that shaped me. But there are so many forms and ways to continue your fight, to do political fight, to continue to defend what is right. So my answer is no, I will never stop.
Good. My answer is going to be that we are going to stop the program for now. But Ina said that she will be a little bit around here. She won't leave straight away to go to the hotel. So you can go, talk to her, take selfies. Always ask, of course, if it's okay. And what better way to end the evening with poetry? So once back again to Helena.
Thank you for your words. Monsteropera. Ik ben een monster. Mijn lief heeft een bril, maar hij ziet het niet. Daar heb ik hem op uitgezocht. Ik sluip langs de muren van de stad. De baby's huilen in hun bakjes. Ik maak een klauw in mijn wand. Mijn lief roemt mijn huid zo zacht. In het donker, ingetrokken tanden als ik sabbel. Ben ik een monster. Ik verberg mijn gezicht, want niemand kijkt. Naast mij in de bus een wezen van licht. Met rode haren, pasgewassen rode haren. Dat wil ik ook. De douche ontwijkt mij. Druppels vallen naast mij neer. Ik verberg mijn ogen. Het knerpen van de kale vogels. Kale vogels, te groot voor mijn hoofd. Snavels door mijn ogen naar buiten. Je kunt me niet kussen. Je tong is een worm. In de tram, zo dichtbij dat ik ruik een ander monster. Kleiner, lelijk, met een buik. Maar dat maakt mij niet meer of minder monster. Gewoon een ander monster. Ik krab mijn schubben open, eronder harde huid. Ik groei elk jaar groter, nooit beter. Nooit meer of minder monster. Als je eenmaal monster bent, maakt meer of minder monster niet meer uit.
Dankjewel. This was Epen Up Live. Thank you very much, our international audience. Dit wie Epen Up Live. Meestal heb ik al je bedankt. Oren wieken ben we er weer. En het kan het een groter contrast wezen, want dan is onze gast Theo Hiddema. Juist. You don't know who you applauded for, yeah. So this is probably going to be the first and last time you applauded for Theo Hiddema. So that's a great one. Dus iedereen van harte welkom je weer Orenwieken. Iedereen kan podium krijgen, iedereen kan mee praten, mee discussiëren. Orenwieken is het dus Theo Hiddema. De weken daarna houdt het over bier. En dat is een heel soort gratis bier. Dus dan, ja, Inna, thank you very much for coming. Please, applause for our special guest. Audience, thank you, and all the people that helped making this broadcast possible. We see you next week. Bye-bye.